March 5, 1944. 28,000 feet above the English Channel, Lieutenant Colonel Cass Hoof gripped the control stick of his P-51 Mustang, watching a formation of Luftwaffe Bf-109s slice through the cloud layer ahead. The German fighters moved with the practiced confidence of pilots who'd owned these skies for years, their sleek profiles cutting through the thin air with mechanical precision. Hoof felt a familiar surge of frustration. His P-51, a formidable machine, was often outclassed in a vertical climb or a sustained high-speed chase by these agile German interceptors, especially when they chose their engagements carefully. The Germans, oblivious to the ingenuity simmering beneath the surface of American war efforts, believed they held a distinct advantage in raw performance when pushed to the edge. They had no idea a quiet revolution was brewing, not in a top-secret lab, but in the mind of a single pilot who dared to question the established limits of aviation fuel. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This narrative will explore how one pilot's seemingly mad, experimental fuel mixture, born of necessity and a deep understanding of internal combustion, would not only transform American aerial combat, but also shift the balance of power in the skies over Europe, granting Allied fighters a super-speed advantage previously thought impossible. Cass Hoof was not just any pilot. He was an anomaly, a mechanical savant with a pilot's instinct. Even as he flew dangerous combat missions, his mind was often dissecting the mechanics of his Packard Merlin engine, listening to its nuances, pushing its limits. He had a deep, almost innate understanding of what made an engine sing and what choked its potential. He'd spent countless hours studying engineering texts long before the war, driven by a fascination with speed and power. Now, this academic curiosity was fused with the harsh realities of aerial combat. He'd seen too many American bombers fall, too many of his friends lost, because their escort fighters couldn't quite keep up with the nimble German interceptors in a prolonged chase or climb. The frustration gnawed at him. He understood the P-51's strengths, its incredible range, its robust airframe, its potent firepower. But he also intimately knew its weaknesses. In those critical moments when a Bf-109 pilot made a snap decision to disengage and climb away, the P-51, running on standard 100-octane aviation fuel, simply couldn't match the vertical velocity or burst speed. Hoof knew there was untapped potential in the Merlin engine, a latent power that standard fuel wasn't unlocking. He observed the Bf-109's bank sharply, climb steeply, and often disappear into the cloud cover, leaving American pilots trailing behind, their engines roaring, but unable to deliver that crucial extra burst of speed. The pilots called it the German escape maneuver, a tactic that relied on their aircraft's superior short-term acceleration and climb rate. This limitation was not a matter of piloting skill, but of engine chemistry. Hoof's obsession wasn't about flying better. It was about making his aircraft perform beyond its design specifications, leveraging every last ounce of power available. He was convinced that the answer lay not in a new engine, but in a new way to feed the existing one. He meticulously recorded engine performance data during his missions, cross-referencing it with the official specifications, seeking discrepancies, searching for the hidden headroom. Every sputtering manifold, every surge of power, every subtle vibration spoke to him in a language he instinctively understood. He felt that the standard 100-octane fuel, while good, was a compromise, a blend designed for safety and reliability across a wide range of conditions, not for the absolute maximum performance needed in the life-or-death struggle of a dogfight. He began to hypothesize about volatile additives, compounds that could, under specific circumstances, unleash a torrent of energy the Merlin engine was theoretically capable of handling. The seeds of a radical idea had been sown, an idea that would soon push the boundaries of both engine design and military protocol. Before the war, Cass Hoof had cultivated an unusual passion for high-performance engines, particularly those used in automotive racing. He spent his youth tinkering with everything from modified Ford flatheads to experimental racing engines, learning the intricate relationship between fuel, compression, and horsepower. He'd even consulted informally for a few independent racing teams, gaining hands-on experience with exotic fuel blends and supercharger systems. This deep dive into the world of internal combustion gave him an intuitive grasp of fuel chemistry and its direct impact on engine output. He understood octane ratings not just as numbers, but as indicators of a fuel's resistance to pre-ignition, its ability to tolerate higher compression ratios and more aggressive timing. His pre-war mentor, Dr. Aris Thorne, a brilliant but eccentric fuel chemist, had often discussed the theoretical limits of various hydrocarbons, sparking Houff's lifelong fascination with getting the most out of an engine. When war broke out, Houff's unique blend of piloting skill and engineering acumen made him an invaluable asset. He was eventually assigned to the 8th Air Force's Technical Division, a role that allowed him to fly combat missions while also advising on aircraft performance and maintenance issues. This position gave him access to engineering reports, fuel specifications, and even some of the experimental systems being considered for future aircraft. He learned about the prevalent 100-130 grade aviation gasoline, which, while revolutionary for its time, still had specific limitations. It was designed to run reliably under various conditions, but it wasn't optimized for short bursts of extreme power at high altitudes, where the thin air already taxed engine performance. He knew that the Merlin engines, especially the Packard-built variants in the P-51, were robust, capable of withstanding significant stresses. He also studied the emerging technology of water methanol injection systems. These systems were primarily designed to cool the air-fuel mixture, preventing detonation and allowing for higher manifold pressures, thereby boosting power temporarily. This technology was being explored for bomber engines and later for some fighter variants, but its widespread adoption was slow and the existing formulations were conservative. Houff saw an opportunity. He theorized that by carefully adjusting the proportions of water, methanol, and potentially other distillates, he could create a mixture that went beyond simple cooling. He believed he could develop a cocktail that not only prevented detonation, but also dramatically increased the effective octane of the fuel during injection, allowing for a far greater power output than officially sanctioned. His theory was bold. The official limits were arbitrary, set by cautious engineers and supply chain logistics, not by the absolute mechanical tolerances of the Merlin engine. He felt that in the crucible of combat, a few minutes of vastly increased power, even if it pushed the engine hard, could mean the difference between life and death. He imagined a blend that would turn the already potent P-51 into a truly unstoppable force, catching the Bf-109s not just in the dive, but in the climb, in the sustained burst of speed that defined a successful interception or evasion. He began to sketch out his ideas in a small notebook, filling pages with chemical formulas, engine schematics, and theoretical performance curves, always keeping an eye on the line between innovation and catastrophic failure. He was convinced that the answers lay just beyond the established parameters, waiting to be discovered by someone willing to take a calculated risk. Ho knew that proposing such a radical idea through official channels would invite endless bureaucracy and likely rejection. He decided to pursue his experiments in secret. Utilizing his authority in the technical division, he quietly requisitioned small quantities of methanol and distilled water, ostensibly for testing ground equipment or for special cleaning solutions. Back at his base, tucked away in a remote corner of one of the maintenance hangars, he began to mix his concoctions. He started with simple ratios, often late at night, after his combat missions were done and most of the ground crew had retired for the evening. His early experiments involved mixing different percentages of methanol and water, adding them to small amounts of standard 100-130 aviation fuel. The smell of the chemicals hung heavy in the air, a clandestine odor of forbidden innovation. His first ground tests were rudimentary. He would hook up a small, scavenged Merlin engine, normally used for parts, to a makeshift dynamometer. The risks were immense. Too much methanol, or the wrong ratio, could lead to catastrophic engine detonation, pre-ignition that could shatter pistons and tear an engine apart. He worked meticulously, documenting every blend, every temperature reading, every fluctuation in engine performance. His notebook, rapidly filling with handwritten notes and crude diagrams, became his Bible. He couldn't do it entirely alone, however. He needed help, trusted hands and keen eyes who understood engines as well as he did, but who also possessed the discretion to keep his unauthorized activities under wraps. He found two such men, Sergeant Frank Miller, a gruff but brilliant engine mechanic who had a knack for understanding Houf's unconventional ideas, and Corporal Thomas "Tommy" Jensen, a young, eager assistant who was meticulous with details. Houf explained his theory, emphasizing the potential combat advantage, and both men, tired of seeing American pilots outmaneuvered, agreed to assist him, risking their careers alongside his. Their initial successes were modest, slight power increases, quickly followed by concerns about engine overheating. But Houf was persistent. He theorized that a specific blend, what he internally referred to as a methanol alcohol distillate, or MAD mix, could offer the perfect balance of anti-detonation and power-boosting properties. After weeks of painstaking trial and error, varying ratios and fuel types, they achieved a breakthrough. On a cold, damp night with only the dim hangar lights illuminating their work, they tested a mixture of 60% methanol, 30% distilled water, and 10% a high-octane racing fuel concentrate Houf had somehow acquired. As the scavenged Merlin roared to life, Sergeant Miller monitored the manifold pressure gauges with wide eyes. Houf made a small adjustment to the fuel flow. Suddenly, the dynamometer reading surged, a sustained, audible increase in power. Their makeshift instruments showed a remarkable 15% increase in power output. The engine ran smoothly, without the dreaded knock of detonation, though exhaust temperatures were notably higher. A quiet cheer, quickly stifled, filled the hangar. It was a clandestine victory, a potent secret that promised to change the very nature of air combat. The MAD fuel mix was more than a theory. It was a reality, ready for the ultimate test. The successful ground test filled Houf with a mixture of exhilaration and dread. He knew the next step was the riskiest, an unauthorized flight test. The only way to truly validate the MAD mix was in the air, under actual combat conditions. The stakes were incredibly high. Engine failure during a mission meant almost certain death. Yet the memory of those escaping BF-109s, the frustrated shouts of his fellow pilots over the radio, pushed him forward. He couldn't wait for official approval. Lives were being lost every day. He made a quiet decision. On his next combat patrol, he would carry the experimental mixture. With Sergeant Miller's clandestine help, a small auxiliary tank, usually reserved for emergency oil, was meticulously cleaned and filled with the MAD mix, plumbed into the P-51's fuel system with a discreet toggle switch in the cockpit. The setup was crude, designed for a single short burst of power. The morning of April 12, 1944, dawned crisp and clear. Houf took off with his squadron, feigning mechanical issues to drop to the rear of the formation. His heart pounded, not from fear of the enemy, but from the audacious gamble he was about to take. At 25,000 feet over the heavily defended industrial targets of the Ruhr Valley, the squadron was jumped by a flight of Focke-Wulf FW-190s. The German fighters, fast and heavily armed, tore into the American formation. Houf saw a single FW-190, its pilot perhaps overconfident, make a high-speed pass on a straggling B-17, then attempt to disengage with a steep climb. This was his moment. He flipped the toggle switch. The change was instantaneous and visceral. The roar of the Merlin engine deepened, a guttural snarl that vibrated through the airframe. The manifold pressure gauge, which usually maxed out at a certain setting, jumped an astonishing amount far beyond what official limits suggested. The P-51 surged forward, pinned Houf against his seat with an unexpected G-force. It wasn't just a slight increase in speed, it was a kick in the pants, a raw, brutal surge of power. He felt his blood rushing. The cockpit temperature seemed to climb slightly, but the engine held. He gained on the FW-190 with alarming speed, closing the distance in seconds. The German pilot, expecting to easily outclimb his pursuer, glanced over his shoulder and must have been utterly bewildered to see a P-51 bearing down on him like an avenging angel. Houf opened fire, a short, precise burst. The FW-190 erupted in flames, spinning out of the sky. After the engagement, as the remaining German fighters disengaged, Houf carefully flipped the switch off, the engine settling back into its familiar rhythm, the brief surge of power fading. His adrenaline coursed, but a deep sense of vindication settled in. The mad mix worked. Back at base, other pilots, including his flight leader, Captain Daniel Edwards, had noticed. What in hell were you doing out there?" Edwards asked, his voice a mix of awe and suspicion. "You were like a goddamn rocket. I swear you caught that 190 in a vertical climb. Nobody does that." Ho merely smiled enigmatically, offering a vague explanation about a lucky burst of speed. But word began to spread through the squadron. Whispers of Haf's magic fuel circulated among the ground crews and pilots. The remarkable kill, coupled with the unusual observations, couldn't be ignored. It wasn't long before questions began to reach the ears of the squadron's commanding officer, and an official inquiry, though still informal, started to quietly gather steam, looking into the extraordinary performance of Lieutenant Colonel Cass Haf's P-51. The informal inquiry quickly escalated. Colonel Harrison Vance, the meticulous and by-the-book commanding officer of the 354th Fighter Group, called Hof into his office. Vance, a veteran of several campaigns, valued discipline and adherence to regulations above all else. He looked at Ho, his face stern. "Lieutenant Colonel Ho, there have been some unconfirmed reports about your recent sorties, specifically your aircraft's performance. Captain Edwards and others have noted exceptional speed and climb rates, particularly in the engagement on April 12th. Can you explain this?" Huff knew this moment was coming. He could lie or he could tell the truth and face the consequences. He chose the latter. He presented Vance with his meticulously kept notebook, detailing his theories, the ground tests with Sergeant Miller and Corporal Jensen, and the unauthorized combat test. Vance's face grew progressively redder as he listened, flipping through the pages of chemical formulas and performance logs. Unauthorized modifications, experimental fuel mixtures. Are you insane, Huff? Do you have any idea the risks you've taken? The potential for engine failure, for damaging invaluable war material? This is a gross breach of protocol. Vance wasn't alone in his skepticism. The Army Air Force brass, particularly those concerned with logistics and aircraft integrity, viewed any deviation from established specifications with extreme caution. General Caldwell, head of Air Material Command's European operations, was particularly vocal, citing concerns about engine longevity, safety, and the precedent such unauthorized tinkering would set. His primary worry was not just the destruction of an engine, but the loss of a valuable pilot and the disruption to the supply chain if every mechanic started experimenting. The official reprimand was swift and severe. Even for a pilot with Haf's combat record, he was grounded from combat missions, pending a full investigation, and Vance threatened him with a court-martial. This was the first major plot twist. Haf's innovation, instead of being immediately embraced, met with institutional resistance and potential career ruin. However, Haf had an ace up his sleeve, beyond his detailed data. He had the testimony of his fellow pilots. Captain Edwards, along with several others who had witnessed Haf's P-51 operate with its impossible speed, stepped forward, albeit cautiously, to corroborate Howe's claims. Their eyewitness accounts, though lacking scientific data, spoke volumes about the dramatic difference in performance. "Sir, I saw it with my own eyes," Edwards stated during a tense meeting with Vance and a visiting general. "He caught an FW-190 in a climb. It simply shouldn't be possible." The turning point came when General Nate Pearson, a pragmatic and forward-thinking officer from Headquarters, 8th Air Force, arrived to assess the situation. Pearson, known for his willingness to consider unconventional solutions, listened intently to Howe's technical explanations and reviewed his data, then spoke with the pilots. He understood the desperate need for an advantage. He saw the fire in Howe's eyes, not of a reckless maverick, but of a man driven by a profound desire to win. This was the second major plot twist. Against the cautious counsel of General Caldwell and others, Pearson saw the potential. He recognized that while Howe's methods were unorthodox, the results were undeniable. He made a bold, controversial decision. "Lieutenant Colonel Howe," Pearson announced, cutting through the bureaucratic resistance, "your methods are indeed an egregious violation of protocol. However, your results are compelling. We cannot afford to ignore any potential advantage in this war." I am authorizing a formal controlled test program. You will lead it. And if this mad mix proves out, General Caldwell, he turned to the disgruntled officer, we will find a way to implement it. Our pilots deserve every edge they can get. The immediate threat of court-martial was lifted, replaced by a monumental challenge to prove his theory under rigorous scientific scrutiny and to develop it into a usable combat advantage. With General Pearson's unexpected endorsement, the clandestine experiments of Cass Houff moved into the full light of official scrutiny, but also gained invaluable resources. A proper test program was immediately established, centered at Wright Field, the Army Air Force's premier flight test facility. Ho, alongside Sergeant Miller and Corporal Jensen, was temporarily reassigned there, now working with a team of seasoned aeronautical engineers and fuel specialists, rather than in secret in a dimly lit hangar. The initial skepticism from the Wright Field engineers was palpable. They were accustomed to meticulously designed, carefully phased development programs, not the audacious field experiments of a combat pilot. However, Houff presented his data with unwavering conviction, supported by the combat reports that now officially documented his unusual performance. The engineers, led by Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant but reserved chemical engineer, began systematic trials. They started by replicating Houff's exact MAD, methanol alcohol distillate mixture, and testing it on various Merlin engine variants under controlled laboratory conditions. The results were astounding. Dr. Reed, initially cautious, watched with growing excitement as the dynamometers consistently registered a 20–25% increase in power output for short bursts, typically 1 to 2 minutes, when the MAD mix was injected into the engine's intake. The mixture worked by combining the anti-detonation properties of methanol with the cooling effects of water, allowing the engine to tolerate significantly higher manifold pressures without pre-ignition. The distillate component, a carefully selected high-octane additive Houff had identified, further enhanced the fuel's resilience. Lieutenant Colonel Houff, Dr. Reed stated, her voice tinged with professional admiration, your intuition was remarkably accurate. This isn't just about cooling. It's about altering the combustion characteristics of the fuel itself, allowing for a sustained overboost. The trade-offs, however, were clear. Engine longevity was a major concern. The increased manifold pressures and higher internal temperatures drastically shortened the interval between engine overhauls. A Merlin engine running on MAD mix for just a few minutes per sortie would likely need servicing in a fraction of its normal operating life. This presented a significant dilemma for the High Command. Was a short-term dramatic combat advantage worth a substantial increase in maintenance and engine replacement? After extensive debate and consultation, General Pearson once again championed Houff's innovation. Gentlemen, he declared at a high-level meeting, we are fighting a war. An engine that lasts 500 hours is useless if the pilot flying it is shot down in the first 100. An engine that lasts 50 hours but wins a critical dogfight is invaluable. The lives of our pilots and the success of our missions outweigh the cost of an engine rebuild. The decision was made. The MAD mix would be implemented fleet-wide for all P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts. The next phase involved refining the delivery system, creating a standardized formulation, and addressing the logistical nightmares of producing and distributing the new fuel additive across the vast European theater. This meant designing an auxiliary tank and injection system that could be retrofitted onto existing fighters, training ground crews on its use and the increased maintenance demands, and establishing production lines for the specific chemical components. The challenges were immense, but the potential impact on the air war was deemed worth every effort. Ho, now officially vindicated, found himself at the forefront of this rapid deployment, working tirelessly with Dr. Reed and her team, converting his MAD idea into a standardized war-winning technology. The deployment of Houff's MAD fuel mix began quietly in late 1944, first with elite fighter groups, then spreading rapidly across the 8th and 9th Air Forces. The impact was immediate and profound. Suddenly, P-51s and P-47s, previously known for their resilience and range, were exhibiting bursts of speed and climb rates that utterly baffled German pilots. Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, a veteran Bf-109 pilot with over 30 confirmed kills, described his first encounter in a post-war interview. "We engaged a flight of P-51s near Berlin. My wingman went for a bomber, and I turned to intercept an escort. He was behind me, then suddenly he wasn't. He was above me. It was like he activated a rocket. My aircraft was at full power, but he accelerated past me in a vertical climb that was simply impossible for a Mustang. I thought it was a new American jet, but it was just another propeller plane. It was truly terrifying. We called them ghosts because they would appear, perform some impossible maneuver, and then be gone." Richter's account was not isolated. Across the Luftwaffe, reports began to filter in. American fighters were performing beyond their known capabilities. The psychological impact on German morale was significant. Luftwaffe pilots, already facing overwhelming numbers, now contended with an enemy that could, at will, suddenly become faster, deadlier. The tactical advantage of a quick disengagement was suddenly negated. In numerous specific battles, the Mad Mix made the critical difference. During the infamous Black Tuesday raid on November 2, 1944, when the 8th Air Force suffered heavy losses, a timely surge of mad-fueled P-51s managed to break up several decisive Luftwaffe attacks, saving countless bomber crews. In one engagement over Mersburg, Captain Edwards, now a staunch advocate for the fuel, used the Mad Mix to catch and destroy 3 FW-190s, attempting to climb away from a bomber formation, a feat he openly admitted would have been impossible just months prior. Statistics soon confirmed the anecdotal evidence. Kill ratios for American fighters, particularly the P-51s, saw a noticeable uptick in late 1944 and early 1945. Analysis showed that a significant portion of these victories occurred during high-energy, short-duration engagements, exactly where the Mad Mix provided its crucial advantage. The enhanced speed allowed P-51 pilots to dictate the terms of engagement, to close the gap rapidly, and to escape dangerous situations with unprecedented swiftness. With official approval, Cass Hauff returned to combat flying, now carrying his own invention into battle. There was a quiet satisfaction in flipping that toggle switch, feeling the familiar surge of power, knowing that this mad idea, born of frustration and daring, was now helping to turn the tide. He wasn't just flying a P-51, he was flying an extension of his own ingenuity. In the subsequent months, Hauff added several more kills to his tally, each one a testament to the effectiveness of his fuel mix, each one a personal victory over the limitations he had once sought to overcome. The skies over Europe, once dominated by German technical superiority, were now firmly contested and increasingly won by the enhanced American fighters. The war ended, and with it the intense secrecy surrounding many of its innovations. Post-war analysis consistently highlighted the Mad fuel mix as one of the unsung heroes of Allied air superiority. Aviation historians and engineers widely acknowledged that Hauff's initiative, supported by General Pearson and refined by Dr. Reed's team, provided a critical edge in the crucial latter stages of the European air war. It wasn't the sole factor, but it was a significant accelerator in shifting the balance of power, forcing the Luftwaffe onto the defensive and contributing to the overall Allied air supremacy that paved the way for victory. Cass Hauff, though never seeking the limelight, received belated but significant recognition for his contributions. He continued his career in aviation, moving into test piloting and engineering roles with various aircraft manufacturers, always pushing the boundaries of performance. His work on the Mad Mix directly influenced the evolution of aviation fuel technology, accelerating research into higher-octane fuels and more advanced power-boosting additives for post-war jet engines. The principles he intuitively grasped about combustion enhancement became foundational for future developments. Years later, during a NATO exercise, Cass Hauff met Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, the German ace who had described the ghost American fighters. Richter, having survived the war, recounted his harrowing experience, his confusion at the impossible speed. "I remember thinking the Americans had developed some secret weapon, a rocket engine in their Mustangs," Richter confessed, a slight tremor in his voice as he recalled the shock of that day. Hauff, with a modest smile, explained the simple yet revolutionary chemistry behind his Mad Mix. Richter listened wide-eyed, then laughed, a genuine relieved sound. So, it was just fuel. All that fear, all that confusion, because of a different type of gasoline. It was a moment of profound irony and shared understanding between former adversaries. Looking back, Ho always maintained a humble perspective on his contribution. "I just wanted to give our boys a fighting chance," he would often say. "It wasn't about being a hero, it was about solving a problem." His story is a powerful testament to how individual initiative, daring to challenge established norms, can have monumental consequences in the face of adversity. It underscores that innovation often emerges from the battlefield, driven by urgent necessity and the bold vision of those willing to take risks for a greater cause. The mad fuel mix proved that sometimes the most profound changes come not from complex new designs, but from unlocking the hidden potential within existing technology, fueled by a pilot's ingenuity and an unyielding will to win. The roar of a P-51, briefly supercharged by a secret cocktail, echoed not just across the battlefields, but through the annals of aviation history. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.